The story begins with Lucas Heburst, the second son of the Duke and Vice-Captain of the Royal Guard, stepping into the dimly lit chamber with an air of suffocating elegance, his presence instantly shrinking the room. His hair, the color of a bright navy blue sky at dawn, framed a face of terrifying perfection, while his golden eyes, reminiscent of honey, locked onto his target with an unreadable intensity. He wore a charcoal gray suit that draped over his broad frame with graceful precision, the attire of a gentleman concealing a predator. For Cecilia, the woman trembling before him, his arrival at a place of ill repute defied all logic, forcing her to question what business a man of his standing had in such a shadowy establishment. He greeted her with a polite, almost mocking pleasure, addressing her by her full noble title, though the weight of his gaze suggested he saw something far more vulnerable than a duke's son should. Cecilia stared back, her vision blurring as tears welled in her eyes, the moisture clinging to her long lashes. The reality of her situation crashed down upon her. She was no longer the proud noblewoman of her past but a commodity to be consumed. She forced the corners of her lips upward, wondering if her smile masked the terror gripping her heart, or if it merely highlighted her desperation. Just moments ago, or perhaps a lifetime ago, she had been a simple college student buried in part-time work and studies, only to regain the memories of her past life the night before her condemnation. Fate had played a cruel joke, reincarnating her as Cecilia Klein, the villainess of an otome game she had once obsessed over. The gravity of her fall from grace suffocated her. She had been disowned by her family, her engagement annulled, and her social standing obliterated. In her ignorance before regaining her memories, she had played the role of the villainess to perfection, forming cliques, ignoring the heroine, and complaining incessantly. She had foolishly believed the worst punishment awaiting her was a quiet life in a convent, but reality proved far harsher. The second prince, a man she now recognized as a superficial playboy, had hated her for her perceived crimes against his beloved heroine. He had even considered marrying her out of twisted obligation because no other family would take her, a fate she narrowly escaped only to land in a high-class brothel. The memory of the brothel madam's pitying gaze burned in her mind as she stood before Lucas. The madam had welcomed her, noting that girls with refinement were always prized in such establishments, a compliment that felt more like a brand upon her skin. The heroine, in a surprising turn of events, had secretly negotiated with the chancellor's son to have Cecilia work as a live-in maid to save her from the convent, but somewhere the threads of fate had tangled. Instead of a maid's uniform, Cecilia found herself wearing a dress meant for seduction, waiting for a client who turned out to be the Azure Rose Knight himself. Lucas Heburst was not merely a love interest, he was a hidden character, a man whose calm smile belied a merciless, sadistic nature reserved for the heroine's enemies. Cecilia recalled the game's lore with trembling clarity. Lucas had risen to the Royal Guard at 18 and became vice-captain within 2 years. He had abandoned his claim to the throne to walk the path of the sword, a path paved with the broken bodies of those who dared harm the heroine. She remembered the stories of kidnappers beaten half to death and noblemen tortured for vulgar behavior, their tendons severed and spirits broken by the man now standing before her. He closed the distance between them, and Cecilia's mind raced with the terrifying possibility that he sought revenge for her treatment of the heroine. After all, in the game, Lucas functioned as an omnipresent guardian, a stalker-like figure who eliminated threats to his childhood friend. Yet, here he was, having bought her time for the entire night, a deviation from the brothel's hourly rules that only his immense wealth and status could secure. Cecilia tried to rationalize his presence, telling herself that the Azure Rose Knight would never stoop to using a brothel, but the undeniable reality of his physical proximity shattered her denial. Desperate to delay the inevitable, Cecilia offered him a meal or a bath, her voice wavering as she tried to play the role of a dutiful hostess. Lucas rejected her attempts with a smooth finality, stating he had already attended to such needs at home. He encroached upon her personal space, his towering frame casting a shadow over her delicate form. He invited her to call him by his name, or even the affectionate nickname Lookie, stripping away the formalities that offered her a thin shield of distance. Cecilia stammered, her face flushing as she requested to be called Cece, a small concession in a negotiation she was destined to lose. The conversation turned to the act itself, and Cecilia's fear spiked. She had convinced herself that a night with a powerful knight like Lucas would result in death from being on top, a naive and terrifying misunderstanding of physical intimacy. She voiced her anxiety about the pain, her innocence clashing with the setting. Lucas, misinterpreting her fear or perhaps reveling in it, promised to be gentle, though he admitted the first time would inevitably carry pain. He spoke of etching the memory of her first time into her very being, a possessive declaration that sent shivers down her spine. Suddenly he seized her, his actions shifting from conversation to dominance. A sharp cry escaped Cecilia's lips as he pulled her close, the sudden contact overwhelming her senses. He whispered that he would hurt her on purpose, a statement that confirmed her worst fears of his sadistic nature. Yet, instead of violence, he captured her lips in a deep, consuming kiss that stole the breath from her lungs. It was an assault on her senses, intense and suffocating, leaving her gasping for air when he finally pulled away. Lucas gazed down at her, his eyes searching hers with a dangerous hunger. He asked if she disliked it, his voice low and teasing. Cecilia, flushed and disoriented, confessed it was her first kiss and that she couldn't respond well, her honesty spilling out before she could stop it. Lucas's demeanor shifted instantly. The predator found a weakness. He demanded she swear it, asking if she would vow her purity to God or her former house, the House of Klein. Cecilia panicked, her mind racing through the implications of a noble oath. She was no longer a Klein, so she reasoned the oath would hold no weight, yet the intensity of his demand terrified her. She questioned why she needed to swear such a thing to him, but the atmosphere in the room allowed no room for refusal. Lucas pressed on, his hand caressing her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin with a possessiveness that claimed ownership. He asked again if the kiss was truly her first, his skepticism evident. Cecilia, defensive and flustered, retorted that, of course, it was. Lucas narrowed his eyes, interrogating her further about the second prince. He demanded to know if His Highness had touched her breasts, his jealousy flaring. Cecilia denied it vehemently, explaining that the prince had never touched her because indecent conduct was strictly forbidden in noble society, especially for unmarried ladies. She elaborated that such a scandal would lead to immediate annulment and banishment to a convent, a fate the prince had avoided to maintain his reputation. Lucas listened, a dark satisfaction spreading across his features. He revealed that he had never actually asked her to swear a formal oath. He simply wanted to confirm that no other man had touched her. The realization hit Cecilia hard. She had been tricked into revealing her purity to the man she feared most. Lucas thanked her for the accidental vow, his smile widening into a grin that felt both charming and terrifying. He looked at her with a gaze that suggested he had won a prize he had long coveted. His eyes then drifted to her dress. He asked if it had been given to her by Lord Thomas Muller. Cecilia, confused by the sudden change in topic, confirmed it was. The air in the room grew heavy, the temperature dropping as Lucas's expression darkened. He commanded her to take it off. When she hesitated, frozen by the sudden aggression, he didn't wait. With a violent motion, he ripped the fabric, the sound of tearing cloth echoing through the silent room. Cecilia screamed internally, convinced that he was finally going to kill her. She squeezed her eyes shut, apologizing to the goddess, Buddha, and her parents for dying before them, bracing herself for the lethal blow. She felt the wind of his fist, the sheer force of his strike cutting through the air near her face. The sound of destruction filled the room. Cecilia slowly opened her eyes to see Lucas's fist buried deep into the wall right beside her head, the plaster and wood shattered by the impact. Smoke and debris drifted from the crater he had created, a testament to the monstrous strength he had just unleashed. He had missed her on purpose, venting his fury, or perhaps his overwhelming relief, into the inanimate structure rather than her fragile body. Lucas withdrew his hand, his breathing heavy but his expression composed once more. He looked at Cecilia, who was shaking uncontrollably, her eyes wide with shock. With a voice that brooked no argument, he delivered his final verdict. He told her that from this moment on he would hold her, a declaration that sounded less like a romantic promise and more like a conqueror claiming his territory. Cecilia Klein, the villainess who thought she had lost everything, had just been captured by the most dangerous man in the kingdom. Lucas Heburst stood in the shadows of his own memory, his mind traversing the timeline of an obsession that had long since consumed him. For years, he had waited, a silent sentinel enduring the agonizing distance between his station and the object of his absolute desire. He recalled the days he spent as a mere observer, forced to watch the woman he coveted offer her calm and gentle smile to the world, her dignified posture capturing the eyes of everyone in the room. But the true source of his torment was the second prince, a man who stood beside her with a casual entitlement that made Lucas's blood boil. The prince received her gaze without effort, basking in a light that Lucas felt belonged solely to him. Though Lucas was the son of a duke, the prince had known him as a commoner, during their childhood, a distinction that fueled a murderous rage within the young knight. Even while serving as the prince's bodyguard, Lucas fought a constant, violent urge to kill the royal standing before him. He held himself back from shouting to the world that she was his, suppressing the possessive roar that threatened to tear through his composed exterior. This internal war began long before he understood the name of the emotion driving him, rooting itself in a childhood defined by a chilling emptiness. The narrative of his life rewound to a time when he was merely 5 years old, the first time his small hands gripped the hilt of a sword. In those early years, Lucas existed as a vessel void of true feeling. While he intellectually understood joy, anger, and sorrow, he remained incapable of experiencing genuine emotional stirrings. He observed the world like a mimic, acquiring necessary social skills to the best of his ability, yet the act of feigning laughter or tears left him with a lingering sense of guilt. He could not replicate the visceral responses that came so naturally to others. Despite his emotional defect, his family and servants showered him with love, a warmth he accepted but could not fully return. The sword, however, changed everything. The moment he lowered the scabbard to his left hip, a strange sensation washed over him, leaving an impression that would remain etched in his memory forever. His body, which had always leaned to the right, feeling perpetually off balance, suddenly stood perfectly straight, anchored by the weight of the steel. It was as if the weapon completed him. His aptitude for martial arts proved boundless, his skills accelerating at a terrifying pace that outstripped his academic learning. Rumors of his potential began to circulate, reaching the ears of those who recognized a prodigy in the making. At the age of 10, his father petitioned His Majesty to have Lucas trained by the vice-captain of the Royal Guard, a renowned swordmaster named Andreas Weber. Andreas, a man of rugged experience, looked down at the young noble with a skeptical eye, asking why the kid had such a long face. He warned Lucas that without stamina he would be dead before the real dying even started, a grim introduction to the hell that awaited him. The training regime for a 10-year-old was nothing short of torture. Andreas barked orders for 800 sit-ups and 800 push-ups, driving the boy to the brink of collapse in a corner of the training grounds. Andreas scrutinized his lack of basic stamina, pushing him until his lungs burned and his vision swam. By the time Lucas turned 13, his body had begun to adapt to the grueling demands of the Royal Guard's regimen. He stood in the training ring, panting heavily, his eyes fixed on his mentor with defiant determination. Yet the gap in power remained an abyss. Lucas calculated that if he continued at this rate, he would forever remain on the defensive, unable to defeat adults who possessed superior size and strength. Andreas taunted him, calling him too weak as he easily parried Lucas's attacks. He noted Lucas's attempt to strike from below but shut down the offensive with a decisive blow that sent the boy sprawling. Andreas lectured him from above, stating that if he couldn't hold his sword, death would inevitably follow. He emphasized the overwhelming difference in strength and stamina between a child and an adult, a biological reality Lucas fought to overcome. Frustration gnawed at Lucas. He cursed his weakness, desperate to land even a single hit on the master. As punishment for his failure, Andreas ordered more push-ups, but before Lucas could drop to the ground, a voice called out to him. Andreas summoned Lucky over, interrupting the cycle of physical penance. Lucas groaned, his body aching, convinced he needed more training, but obeyed the command. It was then that destiny intervened in the form of a young girl. Andreas introduced her as Lady Cecilia Klein, the daughter of the Marquis. She stood there, radiant and composed, while Andreas explained that Lucky was under his care, training to become a knight. He clarified that she was visiting the knights in her capacity as the fiancée of Prince Frix, the second prince. Cecilia's gaze fell upon Lucas's hand, which was battered and bruised from the relentless sparring. She asked softly about his injury, her voice laced with genuine concern. Lucas, unaccustomed to such tenderness, stammered that it was fine, but the physical pain flared sharply as if acknowledging her attention. Andreas laughed boisterously, dismissing the injury. He bragged that Lucas had been training with the order since he was 10, so something trivial like a bruised hand wouldn't faze him. He slapped Lucas on the back, commanding him to stand up straight, jarring the boy's frame. With a prophetic tone, Andreas declared that although Lucas seemed rough now, he would one day surpass even him and become the greatest knight in the land. Lucas, embarrassed and annoyed by the praise, retorted for Andreas to stop saying such things. Andreas then added a comment that would shape the trajectory of Lucas's life. He suggested that someday, Lucas might be the one to protect Lady Klein. Cecilia reacted with a polite gasp, her eyes widening. She looked at Lucas and confessed her own insecurities. She admitted she was unsure if someone like her could fulfill the role of a prince's fiancé. However, she resolved that she wouldn't understand anything unless she tried first. With a determination that mirrored Lucas's own discipline, she vowed to strive to become a noble and worthy bride, one who could stand beside him and be protected by him. She praised Lucas as a hard worker and expressed her desire to meet him again in the near future, calling him Lord Looky. That singular interaction shattered the numbness in Lucas's soul. For the first time, he felt a desperate, clawing need. He wanted to see her again. He wanted to be by her side. The childlike promise of protection she had mentioned took root in his mind, becoming the architect of his future. He decided then and there that protecting her would be his sole purpose. The details of their conversation faded, and he couldn't even recall how they said goodbye, but the impact remained. He couldn't believe that someone like him, a self-proclaimed, emotionally defective vessel, could fall so completely in love at first sight. The reverie was broken by a brutal impact. Andreas struck Lucas, sending him flying across the training ground. The older knight chided him, noting that Lucas usually brushed off hits, but this time he had been distracted. The other knights cheered for the vice-captain, celebrating the hit. Andreas grinned, realizing he had hit a nerve. He teased Lucas, asking if getting blown away in front of Lady Klein was truly that frustrating. Lucas remained silent, his sullen expression betraying his humiliation. Andreas's demeanor shifted from mocking to serious. He reminded Lucas of the cold reality. Cecilia was a candidate to be the prince's bride. He warned Lucas that no matter his status as a duke's son or his claim to the throne, she was someone he must not reach for. He cautioned that pursuing her would only end up hurting both of them, advising him not to chase a dream that was not meant to come true. Lucas acknowledged he knew this without being told, but the fire in his eyes did not dim. Internal rebellion flared within him. Lucas questioned why the restrictions mattered. If the problem was that he was merely a royal guard, then he would simply become someone worthy of being called a prince. A dark, possessive resolve solidified in his heart. He refused to hand her over to the second prince. With a chilling smile hidden behind his hand, he declared to the silence of his own mind that she was his. He would make her his, no matter the cost. Months later, fate tested his resolve. A kidnapping plot unfolded, targeting Mika, a childhood friend from the house of Erlmeyer who possessed amber hair. The scene was chaotic. Lucas, now older and more capable, found himself in a carriage with the victims. Outside, the kidnappers argued, realizing they had made a critical error. They had been instructed to grab the girl with amber hair, but due to the poor lighting, they had snatched the wrong target. They held a blonde girl, Cecilia, alongside Mika, debating their next move. The criminals, callous and greedy, decided that even the wrong girl was a valuable prize. They speculated that a noble lady could fetch a good price if sold to perverts who enjoyed taming such women. They reasoned that she would sell well, turning a mistake into profit. Lucas, listening from within, realized they were already being chased, but he needed to buy time until help arrived. The thugs panicked as they sensed pursuit. They yelled at the carriage occupants not to come any closer. Fearful of losing their primary bounty, they shouted that they were hired to capture the girl with amber hair and offered to return the other one, Cecilia, unharmed if they were let go. Lucas stepped out, his presence dominating the space. He commanded them to let go of the girl. He scoffed at their bargaining, asking if they really thought he would let them go just for returning the hostage unharmed. The kidnappers, underestimating the youth before them, mocked him. They laughed at the ridiculous misunderstanding, not realizing they were facing a monster. Lucas sighed, feigning resignation, and decided to play along for a moment. He calculated that Mika was in the way if he wanted to take the man down, so he needed a precise strike. With a cold, internal monologue, he rejected the idea of letting any kidnapper escape. He saw this as the perfect opportunity to test a body enhancement technique he had recently learned. Lucas instructed the girls to stay quiet and not move. The moment the kidnapper approached the carriage, Lucas closed the distance with supernatural speed. The visual was stark. A blade pressed against Cecilia's throat, her eyes shut in terror, the steel biting into her skin. Page 22 visual. Lucas moved faster than the thug's reaction time, neutralizing the threat instantly. The criminals, it turned out, were well-known offenders, which paradoxically worked in Lucas's favor. He wasn't charged for the violence because of their extensive records. He was taken to the guard station for questioning, but the true punishment arrived in the form of Andreas. Andreas burst onto the scene, shouting Lucas's name, having brought help that was no longer needed. He was absolutely furious, not at the kidnappers, but at his reckless student. He roared, calling Lucas a bastard, and delivered a punishing blow that sent Lucas reeling. Lucas admitted to himself that he had gone too far. However, as he recovered from his teacher's strike, his thoughts were not of repentance, but of refinement. He resolved that next time he would be calmer. He would make sure to beat his enemies half to death, just as he had done, but he would do it without getting caught. For the next week, he was watched closely, a surveillance that felt nearly lethal, but his path was set. The perfect night was being forged in the fires of violence and obsession. The atmosphere in the interrogation room was heavy, thick with the scent of fear and the unspoken promise of violence. Lucas Heburst, the man who walked the line between noble knight and ruthless executioner, stood before his bound captive. The victim, the son of a marquis, had made the fatal error of laying his hands on a potential princess, Cecilia, and for that, his life was forfeit in all but pulse. Ropes dug into the man's flesh, securing him tightly to prevent any futile resistance, while Lucas deliberately blocked the man's line of sight to maintain anonymity. This time, Lucas had calculated every variable. He would not be caught. The prisoner begged, his voice cracking as he pleaded for forgiveness and promised to vanish from high society forever. Lucas listened with a cold detachment, categorizing the man not as a human being, but as a pest that had dared to encroach upon his territory. He mused that men who believed all women existed to be conquered often made fatal mistakes. This particular pest, despite his noble title and handsome appearance, was a predator who had deceived women, impregnated them, and forced them into abortions. Lucas's internal rage spiked, a dark desire to eliminate the man right then and there surging through him. He needed the man to understand the depth of his transgression. The narrative shifted, revealing the intricate web of manipulation Lucas had spun to secure Cecilia. He stood in the royal palace, reporting the unfortunate incident to Prince Felix. Lucas recounted the fate of the Marquis's son, tongue burned, limbs crushed, with a practiced professional concern, omitting the fact that he was the architect of that destruction. Felix, arrogant and oblivious, admitted he didn't know why Lucas was telling him this. Lucas observed the prince closely, noting that while no other men dared approach Cecilia due to Lucas's shadow guarding her, Felix remained the sole, irritating exception. Lucas prodded the prince, asking for his thoughts on Cecilia's recent beauty. Felix's reaction was immediate and visceral. He spat out his disgust, refusing to even speak her name with his filthy mouth. Lucas watched the prince's face twist with disdain, realizing that Felix was completely unaware of the blood, sweat, and effort Cecilia poured into becoming worthy of him. Felix, surrounded by beautiful women daily, had no appreciation for his fiancée. Lucas internalized this rejection not with anger, but with a grim satisfaction. If Felix could not cherish her, Lucas would ensure the engagement ended. He resolved that if Cecilia were to be hurt, his own ascension to power would be pointless. The stage for this social dismantling was complicated by the arrival of Mika, the daughter of the Meyer Count family. Mika moved through society with a naive, destructive gravitational pull, stealing the breath of countless people at parties. However, Lucas recognized the strings being pulled behind her. Her entourage included Michel Hull, the son of a powerful cardinal, and Maximilian Wagner, the knight commander's son. Even Thomas Müller of the chancellor's family hovered in her orbit. Lucas identified Mika not just as a nuisance, but as a double-edged sword that could be wielded. Mika's behavior was a scandal in motion. She openly flirted with Felix, the second prince, despite his engagement to a marquis's daughter. Her brother, Adolphe, was frantic, begging Lucas to intervene as Mika refused to listen to reason. Lucas, feigning the role of a concerned friend, approached Mika. He lectured her on the implications of a lower-status woman approaching a prince who was not her true love. Mika's response was a giggling deflection. She claimed to love Lucas as a brother but declared her romantic love for Lord Felix. She asked Lucas not to get in the way and to watch over them warmly, a statement that sent goosebumps of revulsion down Lucas's spine. As Mika departed with her harem for the lake, Lucas stood with Adolphe, watching the disaster unfold. Rumors solidified into scandal. Mika, her followers, and the third prince, Felix, became the hottest topic in social gatherings. Their behavior at school, including inappropriate visits to the infirmary, crossed every line of nobility. Lucas saw the path forward clearly. For his plans to succeed, Mika needed to be the catalyst for the annulment. However, he needed to neutralize the collateral damage. He conspired with Adolf, arranging for the Duke's family to ostensibly cast Mika aside while secretly maneuvering to prevent the Meyer family from retaliating. Adolf and his family, backed into a corner, swallowed their tears, and agreed to the political sacrifice. The final hurdle was the royal family. Lucas sought an audience with Crown Prince Leon regarding the engagement. The situation was delicate. The engagement had been proposed by the royals, and nullifying it without cause would insult Marquis Klein. However, Lucas argued that Felix's pursuit of a non-royal like Mika raised suspicions about the integrity of the succession. The conversation turned to the legendary sword, X-Axe, and the hero's crest. There was a concern that if Mika inherited the crest, the kingdom could not ignore her wishes. Lucas, playing the master strategist, dismissed Mika as low-born to provoke a reaction, presenting her disposability as a logical option. He managed the Crown Prince's rising killing intent, steering the conclusion toward allowing the annulment to proceed. Lucas predicted that Felix, not being a complete fool, would annul the engagement at the graduation party. His true target, however, remained Thomas Muller. Lucas planned to isolate Cecilia completely, forcing her to beg Thomas in tears, only to have Lucas step in as her sole savior. He acknowledged he was pushing Cecilia too hard, but the end justified the brutal means. The timeline snapped back to the present at the Smokestack Manor. Lucas, having finished his interrogation of the Marquis's son, was met by his subordinate, Cedras, or Finn. The subordinate was aghast that Lucas was using the manor for such dirty work and had broken a top-grade dagger with supreme durability during the torture. Lucas, unbothered, changed his clothes to rid himself of the filth of his work. He asked if the plan was proceeding, to which the subordinate apologized for the mess. Lucas descended the stairs, his demeanor shifting from assassin to lover. His subordinate called out to him to be careful and avoid mistakes. Lucas ignored the warning, his focus entirely on the woman waiting for him. He found Cecilia, perhaps sleeping or feigning it, surrounded by an aura of innocence that contrasted sharply with the violence he had just committed. He embraced her, noting how light she felt in his arms. A warm happiness washed over him, a dark contentment born from the realization that his machinations were working. She was there. She was safe. And soon she would be entirely, irrevocably his. The clock to the genesis of Cecilia's despair, anchoring the story in the year she turned 10. It was then that the royal family proposed her engagement to Prince Felix, the second prince. The memory of their first meeting remained etched in her mind as a cold, humiliating affair. Felix did not offer her an escort, nor did he allow her to introduce herself properly before commanding her to sit. He scrutinized her with a critical, bored gaze, dismissing her as stiff in both mind and body. With the casual cruelty of a spoiled royal, he lamented that she was plain and lacked the feminine figure of his mother, the Marchioness of Klein. Cecilia, bound by duty, swallowed the insults, internalizing that her role was not to please Felix personally, but to support the crown prince and the country as the second prince's consort. She resolved to compensate for everything Felix lacked, but the weight of this obligation felt like heavy shackles binding her feet, causing her once vivid world to fade into a monochrome existence. Her education as a candidate for the prince's bride began immediately, a relentless barrage of history, etiquette, and dance that left her feeling burnt out after only a few sessions. During one such stifling study session, the door burst open without a knock, shattering the quiet atmosphere. It was Sir Andreas Weber, the deputy commander of the Imperial Guard Knights, a man whose boisterous energy filled the room. He had come to introduce the members of Cecilia's escort, claiming he had a solid batch of promising recruits that year. Among the uniformed men, Andreas pointed out a specific youth who was not yet officially a royal guard but was close in age to Cecilia. Cecilia's gaze followed Andreas's finger to a training ground scene playing out in her memory or through a window. She watched a young boy, Lucas, disguised as Lookie, being struck down repeatedly by a superior opponent. Yet each time he was blown away or beaten into the dirt, he rose again without lamenting the overwhelming difference in strength. Cecilia found herself transfixed by his resilience, mesmerized by the sight of him facing forward without fear or hesitation despite the brutality of his training. She noticed his hand was injured and felt a sudden, instinctive urge to heal him, only to remember with frustration that she possessed no healing magic. Andreas formally introduced the boy as Lookie, explaining that due to certain circumstances, he had taken the boy in and was training him under his personal care. As Cecilia looked into Lookie's eyes, she caught a fleeting glimpse of gold, a trait exclusive to the royal family. She quickly dismissed it as her imagination, rationalizing that the boy stood before her as a commoner. Unbeknownst to her, Lucas was utilizing transformation magic to conceal his identity during his night training to avoid special treatment. Internally, the stoic boy was in a state of panic, terrified that his transformation had faltered under her scrutiny and worried that she viewed him as a pathetic, weak knight. Cecilia timidly asked if his hand was okay. Andreas laughed off the concern, slapping Lucky's back with enough force to generate a loud thud, claiming that a boy who had trained since age 10 wouldn't count such a bruise as an injury. Cecilia, observing the battering Lucky had endured, felt a surge of empathy. Andreas, continuing his lecture, admonished Lucky, stating that complaining without trying one's best was wrong and that he wouldn't be able to face those supporting him if he looked down just because his burden was heavy. Moved by the boy's silent dedication, Cecilia intervened. She told Lucky that he was incredibly hardworking. In that moment, a new resolve crystallized within her. She vowed to strive to become a noble princess worthy of being protected by him. She decided that the moment she returned home, she would ask her father for permission to study healing magic, driven by a desire to heal people like Lucky who were wounded both inside and out. Time accelerated, blurring into a whirlwind of days filled with rigorous study and social obligations. Cecilia balanced her tea parties with noble daughters and her desperate late-night study sessions for healing magic. The narrative arrived at her debut, the 16-year-old evening ball, an event she anticipated with nerve-wracking anxiety. The ballroom buzzed with the presence of Prince Felix, but Cecilia noticed an anomaly. There were far more knights present than usual. The nobles whispered about the intense security, attributing it to the prince's presence, but the deterrent power of the royal guard was absolute. The nobles with impure intentions were silenced, unable to approach her, and Cecilia mysteriously navigated the soiree without any stress. As she prepared to leave, exhausted but relieved, her eyes locked onto a passing knight. It was Lucas, now older, and for a split second, she saw those same golden eyes she had glimpsed years ago. The resemblance to the boy, Lucky, struck her, but her logical mind rejected the possibility that the Duke's son and the battered trainee could be the same person. She called out, asking him to wait, but the moment passed. Following the ball, Cecilia began to utilize the healing magic she had worked so hard to master. She reasoned that it would be a waste not to use it and that it would kill two birds with one stone by improving the royal family's tattered reputation. She began visiting the knights, healing their wounds after their rituals and interrogations. The knights, overwhelmed by the relief from their pain, began to revere her. One knight, tears in his eyes, thanked her, calling her the Rainbow Maiden. Cecilia found the title mortifying, but she couldn't deny the effectiveness of her actions. Rumors spread that the second prince's fiancé possessed amazing magic and was akin to a saint. She told herself she had to pull it together, especially since Lord Felix's reputation remained as terrible as ever. The scene shifted to an outdoor excursion. Cecilia, accompanied by her guard, was thanked by a knight for coming all the way out to escort them. She humbly deflected the praise, insisting it was her job and that their duty wasn't done until everyone was safely back. Suddenly, a commotion erupted in the distance. A panic-stricken voice cried out that something terrible had happened. The alarm was raised, demon foxes had appeared, shattering the peace and plunging the group into immediate danger. Small magical beasts slip through the defensive wards meant to repel larger threats, occasionally appearing on the outskirts of the capital. Just adjacent to the kingdom of Beller lies the border forest, a place where danger lurks in the shadows. Cecilia finds herself paralyzed by misfortune, realizing with horror that she is the one destined to encounter such a threat. An extremely rare case manifests before her eyes as she is attacked by a demon fox. The royal guards, ill-equipped for specialized combat against magical beasts, panic in the face of the creature. They refuse to accept their helplessness but prioritize Cecilia's safety, pleading with her to run while they act as decoys. Cecilia, frozen in disbelief, rejects the idea of abandoning them. Suddenly, a high-density barrier manifests, possessing a level of strength comparable to the wards protecting the royal chamber. A figure intervenes, and Cecilia recognizes the color of his hair. Lucas arrives on the scene, his presence commanding immediate attention. The demon foxes lunge, jaws agape and fangs bared, but Lucas moves with blinding speed. In a singular, fluid motion, he draws his blade and cleaves through the beast, black blood spraying across the air as the monster is bisected. The guards rally, shouting to pursue the remaining beasts, but their attention snaps back to the man who felled the threat in an instant. Cecilia stares at his fearless profile and unflinching step, a sense of familiarity washing over her. She realizes the sensation is far more than simple déjà vu. Although his features appear ordinary, lacking the dawn-colored hair and golden eyes she remembers, Cecilia sees through the disguise. She recognizes the man destined to become the country's finest knight. Even though he should possess no memory of their promise, the connection remains undeniable. Lucas turns his gaze toward her, and she whispers his nickname, Lord Looky. He acknowledges her presence, stating he looks forward to their next meeting in the near future before departing. Cecilia stands amidst the aftermath, the sensation of having been protected lingering in her mind. The scene shifts as she snaps back to reality, breathing heavily. A voice advises her to rest upon returning home, noting her pale complexion and the strain the magical beast encounter must have placed on her. Cecilia agrees, her heart pounding rhythmically in her chest. She attempts to rationalize this physical reaction, grasping for a psychological explanation. She concludes it must be the suspension bridge effect, convincing herself that any girl would be flustered by a handsome, incredibly strong royal guard fulfilling his duty. She admonishes herself for becoming conscious of him simply because he resembles someone she once admired, dismissing the feelings as ridiculous. Suddenly, she awakens in a bed, the memories of nostalgic dreams fading as consciousness returns. A woman's voice urges her not to rise, warning that it will strain her body. Cecilia wonders about the stranger's identity, noting she does not appear to be from the brothel. The woman explains that Cecilia collapsed from exhaustion and developed a fever, then offers to bring water. As the woman gently tends to her, Cecilia realizes the water tastes sweet and takes in her surroundings. The room is undeniably luxurious, sparking confusion about whose mansion she currently occupies. Cecilia introduces herself, but immediately regrets it. She panics internally, reminding herself she is supposed to be a penniless ex-courtesan, yet she instinctively used the etiquette of a marquis's daughter. The women before her are clearly maids from a high-ranking noble family. The head maid, San, introduces herself and presents the team assigned to Cecilia, Anna, Kate, and Elsa, who serve as both personal maids and herbalists. San assures Cecilia she can call on them for anything. Cecilia observes the maids, puzzled by the exclusive assignment. She notes how beautiful and cute one of them is, questioning how such a girl could also serve as a guard. Their bows are flawless, indicative of etiquette reserved for a noble lady of at least countess rank. Cecilia's mind races, trying to recall how she arrived here. She knows of no precedent where a maid doubling as a guard would be assigned to the Princess Pavilion. Suddenly, vivid memories of the previous night flood her mind. She recalls Lucas's incredible stamina, likening him to a super stud from a past life. She remembers the sensation of him finishing inside her multiple times and being held throughout the night. Her survival instincts kick in, and she concludes that since she is alive, she successfully avoided death by sex. She deduces she was brought here while unconscious. Flashes of the intimate encounter return. He asked her something during the act, she answered, and he held her again, but her memory fades after that point. She realizes she is in the residence of Duke Heburst in the royal capital. Just then, the door opens, and a voice announces her awakening. Lucas enters the room. Cecilia immediately scolds him for barging into a lady's sleeping quarters without knocking, declaring it ungentlemanly. Lucas apologizes but offers a scandalous excuse. He claims he got carried away with the joy of having her for the first time, and pushed her too hard. Cecilia is mortified that he would say such things out loud so casually while others are present. The maids overhear the phrase, "push too hard," causing Cecilia immense embarrassment. Lucas inquires about her fever and current condition. Cecilia stammers that she is fine and thanks him for his concern. She addresses him as Cici, then corrects herself to the son of Duke Heburst, then inadvertently calls him Luki-sama, confusing herself with the proper address. Lucas leans in close, teasing her by asking if she is trying to seduce him with her expression. Cecilia lets out a high-pitched yelp as he touches her. Lucas asks what is wrong, continuing his advance. Cecilia breathes heavily, her resistance melting under his touch. Suddenly, Lucas stops, realizing the audience in the room. He apologizes to the maids for forgetting their presence. Cecilia is flushed and overwhelmed. Lucas attempts to shift the blame, claiming it isn't his fault but rather that Cecilia is too cute and a bit lewd. This remark draws the ire of San, the head maid. Despite smiling, San emits a terrifying aura that frightens even the other maids. She tells Lucas to behave himself. She issues a stern ultimatum, If he dares to mistreat Lady Cecilia again, she will deal with him with all her might. Lucas meekly accepts the scolding. San turns to Cecilia, instructing her not to hesitate to report if Lucas tries to force anything like the previous night again. Cecilia is stunned by how easily Lucas gave up. San explains that she used to be Lucas's nanny, granting her permission to speak to him in such a manner. She promises to take full responsibility and deal with him properly. Lucas comments that saying like parent, like child, would be an insult to San. Cecilia remains confused, processing the reference to last night. San leaves and the room falls quiet. Alone with her thoughts, Cecilia looks down at her chest. She pulls open the front of a nightgown she has never seen before. Her skin is covered in red marks. Realizing the extent of the previous night's activities, Cecilia unleashes a silent, horrified scream. The atmosphere in the room remains thick with tension following the intimate revelation. Lucas, usually composed, recoils as Cecilia shouts for him not to touch her, the memory of the previous night's intensity fueling her outburst. San, the head maid, admonishes him sharply, calling him an idiot for his lack of restraint. She checks on Cecilia's well-being while Lucas coughs awkwardly, attempting to mask his embarrassment after realizing he voiced his thoughts too loudly. Lucas slumps into a chair, an aura of utter dejection hanging over him as the reality of his blunder sets in. San interrupts his wallowing to announce that his escort has arrived. She ruthlessly informs him that she will bring medicinal bathwater and a steamed towel for Cecilia, but she promises to have a proper talk with him later regarding his behavior. Lucas, looking defeated and gloomy, rises to leave for a monster extermination mission, while San advises him to save any reconciliation attempts for after his return. As he departs, he mutters about whether he messed up, his confidence shattered by Cecilia's rejection. With Lucas gone, San introduces Anna, a maid who doubles as a bodyguard. Cecilia reports that her fever has subsided thanks to the rest, though she remains flustered. San directs her to the bathhouse, referred to as a yudono, a term usually reserved for luxury, suggesting she change clothes and wash off the sweat to avoid discomfort. Cecilia hesitates, panic rising within her as she realizes the implications of disrobing. Cecilia's hesitation stems not merely from the modesty of a marquis's daughter, but from the realization that her body is covered in marks from the previous night. She attempts to refuse assistance, stating she can bathe herself because she does not want to be seen. The maids, however, deduce the situation immediately. They whisper among themselves, realizing Lucas's mischief left visible evidence, and while they find Cecilia's embarrassment beautiful, they agree that Lucas's lack of restraint is a problem that San must address. San intervenes with polite firmness, explaining that she cannot allow Cecilia to bathe alone due to her illness and her status as someone very important to Lucas. Cecilia, realizing that refusing further might cause the maids to be punished for her selfishness, relents. To compromise, the maids offer to serve her while blindfolded to preserve her dignity, assuring her they are professionally trained to perform their duties without vision. Anna mentions she wanted to comment on many things during the bath but refrained, leaving Cecilia to wonder what kind of job requires such specific blindfold training. As Cecilia is groomed before a mirror, she notices a specific, intricate mark on her lower abdomen and questions its origin. The maids identify it as a Val mark. They explain the lore behind this ancient magic. Cecilia is horrified, realizing she possesses memories of this sequence of Haefst characters from a numerology class on ancient script. The maids confirm that Lucas informed them the mark had appeared, though they claim ignorance regarding the specific situation at the time it was carved. Cecilia panics, realizing she does not remember consenting to such a permanent magical bond. Her mind races to the worst conclusion. She wonders if she has been taken as a concubine or a mistress. The maids immediately correct her, visibly offended on her behalf. They clarify that she is neither a concubine nor a mistress, but Lucas's fiancée. They explain the truth behind her arrival. The Heberst ducal house used its influence behind the scenes to intercept her before she could be sold into the brothel. Although it appeared she was being protected through the brothel to avoid political trouble, she never served a single customer and was never truly sent there. Her family, aware of the situation, accepted the Duke's intervention and remained silent. Cecilia processes this information, realizing she hasn't been cut off from society but rather repositioned as the fiancée of Lucas Heberst. Since her arrival, she has spent her days exclusively in Lucas's room, eating, bathing, and sleeping there, protected by powerful wards stronger than those in the royal castle. San informs her that a visitor has arrived. Lady Annika Montana, Lucas's older sister. Cecilia prepares to meet Annika, questioning the propriety of a family member coming to visit her instead of the other way around. She enters the room to find Annika, a woman of overwhelming beauty, radiating a beauty aura that stuns Cecilia. Annika introduces herself and apologizes for her foolish younger brother's reckless behavior. Annika and San share a knowing conversation about Lucas's behavior, with Annika noting that shaking the composure of a perfect noble lady like Cecilia suggests Lucas did something significant. Annika expresses joy that Lucas's long-held wish has finally come true. Cecilia is confused by the phrase, long-held wish. Annika is shocked to learn that Lucas hasn't explained anything to Cecilia directly. Annika decides to explain the political shifts that made this engagement possible. She reveals that Lord Felix, the former second prince and antagonist who shamed Cecilia, has been stripped of his title. The royal family had been reviewing Felix's conduct even before the graduation party incident. Consequently, Felix's engagement was annulled, and he lost his succession rights. Annika outlines the new line of succession. Lucas was originally fourth in line. His older brother, Annika's other brother, is third in line but is the designated heir to the ducal house. Therefore, the position of second prince fell to Lucas. The narrative shifts to the border forest, where Lucas finishes the monster extermination. His subordinates report that all magical beasts have been eliminated. Despite the victory, Lucas remains despondent. He recalls Cecilia's rejection, "Don't touch me," and is consumed by gloom. He acknowledges internally that due to Cecilia's princess education, she is the only one qualified to be the fiancée of the new second prince. However, he feels guilty for the confusion he caused and believes she hates him. Back at the mansion, Annika continues her explanation. She confirms that the king has approved the engagement and that the Klein family gave their polite consent. She emphasizes that Lucas himself wished for this position. Annika assures Cecilia that there are few official duties, as there are things only Lookie can do. Cecilia catches the nickname Lookie and wonders about these specific duties. The conversation turns to the servants. San is still furious about Lucas's behavior, while the other maids gossip about the outing, where Lucas apparently clashed with others over his treatment of Cecilia. Kate teases Anna again about the blindfolded bathing, nearly crossing a line before Anna shuts her down. Suddenly, a new character interrupts, Finn, a direct attendant of Lord Lucas. He introduces himself and presents gifts from Lucas to Cecilia and Annika. Annika opens hers to find a bright navy blue ribbon with golden embroidery, Lucas's colors, remarking on his possessiveness. Finn reveals he is San's son and Lucas's foster sibling. He informs them that Lucas has returned from his duties but is currently sulking in the parents' guest room rather than his own, terrified of facing Cecilia. Cecilia feels guilty, realizing Lucas is avoiding his own room because she is occupying it. Finn observes Cecilia's reaction and realizes there is a misunderstanding. He thought the affection was one-sided on Lucas's part, but sees Cecilia is clearly conflicted and drawn to him. Finn and the maids hold a strategy meeting. They realize that if left to their own devices, Lucas will remain too depressed to approach her, and Cecilia is too confused to initiate. Finn simulates a scenario where Cecilia asks Lucas to come to her room, predicting that Lucas, despite being a top-class assassin, would panic and escape through the window. Determined to unite the couple, the servants begin plotting an intervention. They discuss drastic measures, such as placing freezing magic on the mansion's windows or setting traps in the garden to prevent Lucas from fleeing. They conclude that they must corner Lord Lucas in a place where escape is impossible to force a conversation. The group resolves to confront the situation head-on to buy time for the couple to reconcile. The corridor outside the room bustles with frantic energy as the maids execute their scheme. San and her team encourage Cecilia, assuring her that her appearance is perfectly fine. In fact, it is perfect. Cecilia questions the necessity of her attire, but the maids push her forward with cries of "good luck" and well wishes for a nice conversation. As the plan commences, the maids whisper among themselves, admiring the terrifying speed at which they mobilized. They commend Lady Annika's sense of style, noting that even the deliberately loose strands of hair from Cecilia's braid were a calculated touch to enhance her appeal. The strategy relies on a geographical advantage. They selected a location where escape routes are easily blocked. The maids reason that the public bath is the only place where Lord Lucas cannot flee, primarily because running away while completely naked would be seriously uncool. Furthermore, escaping would require him to pass Lady Tsuruya, and the room possesses only a single entrance and exit. San steels herself, declaring she will carry forward the sudden anger and tears welling in her chest to ensure the plan's success. She instructs the other women to prepare the bath immediately, utilizing her intimidating presence to ensure even Lucky won't be on guard. Cecilia marvels at the efficiency of the Duke's servants, wondering if they require skills comparable to court magicians. She notes the incredible level of hot water preparation, realizing she cannot back out now. Standing before the door, she steels her resolve, acknowledging that beyond the threshold lies Lucas. She reminds herself that she came all this way specifically to talk to him, driven forward by the intense, scary seriousness in the maid's eyes. Inside the steam-filled chamber, Lucas sits submerged in the water, running a hand through his wet hair with a heavy sigh. He calls out to San, questioning her actions, but freezes when he sees Cecilia standing there. Shocked, he demands to know why she is there. Cecilia stammers that she wants to talk. Lucas immediately deduces that the maids set him up, cursing their interference. Cecilia admits that San and the others helped make this happen, but she insists her desire to speak with Lord Lucky is genuine. Cecilia confesses she got swept up in the servants' momentum without thinking, acknowledging that the location is less than ideal. She reveals she was waiting for him, too, and felt hurt that he didn't come to show his face despite returning to his room. She admits that, as a young lady, she knows she is doing something unbelievably improper. However, she feared that if she went to his temporary room, he would run away, leading her to worry that he was disappointed in her. Lucas, recovering his composure, asks if Cece is still angry. When she hesitates, he decides to take her silence as a convenient yes. He tests the waters, asking if it is okay for him to touch her. Before she can process the question, he suggests they warm up first since they are already there. He remarks that the bath is more spacious and comfortable than the one in his room, implying there is no need to hold back. Cecilia, flustered, attempts to retreat, offering to wait outside, but Lucas insists that isn't the point. He beckons her closer. When she hesitates, he comments on her surprising obedience. He asks her to close her eyes so they can finally settle down and talk. Cecilia complies, squeezing her eyes shut. However, instead of speaking, Lucas moves in. Cecilia reminds him they were supposed to talk, but her words are cut short as he touches her. Lucas observes her reaction closely. He asks if she still has her eyes closed. He reveals a magical secret. He doesn't need to see her physical reaction because he can sense the magical power flowing through her body and forming shapes. He explains that Cecilia's magic manifests as a beautiful rainbow color. When she feels good, this rainbow light softly expands from the point of contact. He asserts that even if her eyes are closed or she denies it, her magic tells him exactly how she feels. Cecilia is mortified, realizing he can see her pleasure. She questions what the heck her magic is doing, demanding he stop giving examples. She feels she is being toyed with, yet she cannot bring herself to truly refuse him. She internally conflicts with the sensation of being touched, reminding herself she came just to have a proper talk. As the intimacy escalates, Cecilia's insecurities surface. She pulls away, breathing heavily, and asks, "Is that it?" She laments that this behavior is more like an actual wife rather than a fiancée. A dark thought consumes her. She accuses him of only being after her body. Lucas's demeanor shifts instantly. He vehemently denies the accusation. He insists he came all this way to talk to her. He demands to know who filled her head with the idea that he is only interested in her body. Cecilia counters that he is the one who made her feel this way by engraving the vow mark on her. She asks if her body was the sole reason for the mark. Lucas looks genuinely hurt, whispering, "No way." Cecilia continues, admitting it is partly her fault for feeling good, but accusing him of doing as he pleases. Suddenly, the atmosphere changes. Cecilia notes a familiar, dangerous shift in him. His sadistic switch has flipped. Lucas embraces her tightly and drops his facade. "I love you, Cecilia," he declares. He confesses that he has been yearning for her for a long time. He reveals the truth behind his career. He joined the Royal Guard specifically to protect her. He honed his sword skills solely for her sake. He insists this is not a lie. His confession pours out with intensity. Now that he has finally earned the right to stand by her side, he refuses to let anyone else take her away. He declares he doesn't want anyone else to touch her. He loves only her. He explains that he didn't mind if the vow mark failed and rendered him impotent because he never intended to be with anyone but her. He admits he engraved the vow when her reason had completely melted away. Cecilia recalls his words about her reason melting and questions if this is a kind of training. Lucas corrects her, explaining the fundamental law of the vow mark. It will not succeed if there is even a slight rejection in the woman's heart. This fact serves as undeniable proof that she opened her body and heart to him. Cecilia processes this revelation. She realizes that the mark was carved because she accepted him from the bottom of her heart. She mentally concedes defeat to the terrifying power of beautiful men. She reflects that, despite her duty as the third prince's fiancée to avoid being conscious of other men, she strangely never feels disgust toward Lucas. Lucas asks if she still cannot believe his feelings. Cecilia admits she doesn't know if her feelings constitute love yet and worries she might not be able to return his feelings fully. Lucas chuckles softly, unfazed. He tells her it is all up to how she feels. He assures her that he never doubted her feelings. As he leans in, he confidently declares that a kiss like this is something she will never be able to do with anyone but him. Cecilia stirs from her slumber, the haze of sleep lifting as her eyes flutter open. She is greeted immediately by Lucas, who lies beside her, gazing at her with intense affection as he bids her good morning and declares his love. A sudden realization jolts her. She is completely naked beneath the sheets, causing her to let out a high-pitched shriek of embarrassment. Lucas, unfazed, moves in for a greeting kiss, his lips meeting hers before she can fully protest. Cecilia stammers, overwhelmed by the morning intimacy, while Lucas teases her, remarking that she is so cute he wants to eat her up. He points out that even her ears have turned bright red, a physical betrayal of her flustered state. Lucas rationalizes the kiss as normal behavior for fiancés, asking if he can give her a proper good morning kiss. Cecilia pleads for moderation, insisting that excessive kissing provides too much stimulation for first thing in the morning. Her resistance melts into soft sighs as he continues, urging her not to hide so he can take a good look at her. He shifts the sheets to inspect her chest, musing aloud whether the vow mark has been truly engraved into her heart and body, serving as proof of the depth of his love. Memories of the previous night flood Cecilia's mind as Lucas confirms the mark's presence visually. He notices something else and points out that fluids are leaking from inside her. He calls it a waste, prompting a confused and mortified reaction from Cecilia, who does not understand what kind of confirmation involves staring at such aftermath. Lucas counters that it isn't a waste to him at all, staring intently. Cecilia feels the sensation of the fluid overflowing as she tenses up, the embarrassment traveling down her spine and overwhelming her to the point where she feels she might die. She begs him to stop looking, shielding herself in shame. Lucas, fueled by her reaction, declares his love again and asks to initiate intimacy once more. Cecilia protests, reminding him they engaged in such activities just last night, but he kisses her deeply. He marvels at her combination of cuteness and sexiness, brushing aside her weak refusals. He reiterates that she is the only one he desires, reminding her that no other woman can satisfy him or calm him down. He confesses that until now, only Lord Felix had been close to him, emphasizing his solitary emotional state before her. Overwhelmed by his passionate declaration that he loves and likes only her, Cecilia finds her resolve crumbling. She acknowledges internally that she is weak to being passionately desired by someone she has already accepted multiple times. When Lucas asks for permission to enter her, she acquiesces, softly requesting that he not be too rough. Later, the room is quiet. Lucas sits on the edge of the bed, sighing heavily with his hand over his face, thinking, "This is bad." Cecilia looks at him with concern, wondering what is wrong. Lucas internally reveals the source of his distress. He is so happy that he feels he might crush her in his arms. He panics at the thought of accidentally causing death by sex, and frantically resolves to pretend the dark thought never happened, promising aloud to be gentle. Cecilia remains confused by his erratic behavior. The intimate atmosphere is shattered by Finn, who calls out from behind a screen. He announces a new problem: a flame devourer beast has appeared. It is an S-rank difficulty monster that only responds to physical attacks. Lucas, annoyed, dismissively tells Finn to inform Leon that the knights should be able to handle it. Cecilia is shocked that he casually dropped the name of the crown prince, Leon, and realizes that Leon, in the Knight Order, is actually Lord Leon, the commander of the Unified Knight Order. She is also mortified that Finn likely heard everything they were just doing. Finn explains the tactical situation. The Black Knights, who specialized in hunting magical beasts, were merged into the White Knight Corps. However, Lord Leon specializes in defensive magic, meaning an enemy requiring physical attacks would be a tough matchup for him. Finn asserts that the only one who can honestly handle the flame devourer beast is his master, Lucas. He warns that if Lucas doesn't go, the Order will be in serious trouble. Cecilia recalls seeing Lucas wearing the unpleasant Black Knight Corps uniform in the past. She wonders why someone from the Royal Guard is being summoned when the expert beast hunting squad is already gathered. Lucas remains obstinate, telling Finn to make the messenger wait another 2 hours. Cecilia is appalled that he is treating a crown prince's messenger so casually, noting that subjugating such a beast should be an important matter. Finn reveals the gravity of the summons. The letter is marked with Crown Prince level status, meaning ignoring or disobeying it carries serious punishment. Furthermore, the messenger is not just a courier but the vice commander of both the Black and White Knight Corps. Cecilia is stunned to learn that high-ranking officers, Carl, vice captain of the Black Knights, and Alphonse, vice captain of the White Knights, are waiting personally. Cecilia reflects on the hierarchy to make sense of the situation. The Royal Guard, focused on royal protection and anti-personnel combat, is led by Commander Andreas with Lucas as vice commander. The Black-White Knights, focused on magical beast subjugation, are led by unified Commander Leon, with Carl and Alphonse as vice captains. The Blue Knights handle castle security. She finds it mysterious that Lucas is summoned for beast subjugation when his brother Leon is the General Knight Commander. However, she reasons that it makes sense to call Lucas, who is said to have the strongest magic among the 3 factions, even if the beast is weak to physical attacks. Lucas groans, realizing he cannot escape the duty. He threatens to punch Leon later. Cecilia panics, asking what he plans to do if he strikes the Crown Prince and asking him to consider his new position as second prince. She argues back, stating that showing discord will give others an opening and that the people will suffer the consequences. She asks if he plans to leave her all alone. Lucas sighs but seems pleased by her scolding. He urges her to say more, telling Finn to look at how wonderful she is. He comments that her scolding is not something she should say with her chest completely exposed, praising her as the best. He finally agrees to go, stating he will spare Leon this time for Cece's sake. He reveals his true motivation. It would be a hassle if the Knight Order suffered casualties because he cannot allow other knights to be the ones healed by his fiancée. Cecilia is taken aback by his reasoning. Lucas asks if it isn't obvious, revealing he knew about her reputation. He explains that she extends a helping hand to anyone in need, orphans, knights, priests, using her rare healing magic. He admits the admiration she received from everyone, including the royal guards, was overwhelming and made him constantly jealous. Cecilia realizes that her freedom to practice medicine and the assignment of royal guards for her protection were all influenced by his possessive oversight. Later, Cecilia is exhausted, her muscles screaming in pain. The maids, blindfolded once again, assist her in the bath. She requires support from both sides just to walk, apologizing profusely to the servants. She wonders if Lucas has arrived at the camp yet. A sudden realization strikes her. She forgot to greet Lucas before he left. The maids agree that failing to see off her fiancé while staying at his house is a bit of a social blunder, though they note her health comes first. To remedy the situation, one of the maids offers to use long-distance communication magic. Cecilia is impressed by the high capabilities of the ducal household servants. She decides to send a message. She dictates, "Praying for your safety," but adds that there is also something I want to ask. She asks the maid to deliver this inquiry along with her prayers. Amidst the scorching heat of a subjugation mission, the S-difficulty flame devourer beast, known as a salamander, roared as a sapphire-colored crystal began to violently protrude from its forehead. The creature, previously a mere fire lizard, was rapidly undergoing a metamorphosis into an ancient dragon, causing widespread panic among the knights tasked with its containment. Prince Leon, observing the dire situation from the command tent, noted that the beast's hardening outer skin had rendered their physical and magical attacks increasingly ineffective. The defensive unit, barely maintaining a barrier, neared its breaking point as their swords shattered upon impact, unable to even scratch the monster's hide. Leon, prioritizing a swift resolution with minimal casualties, turned to Lucas and commanded him to deploy X-Axe, the legendary weapon capable of ending the threat. Lucas, however, harbored reservations about using the weapon, as wielding it required him to transform into his alter ego, Lucky, a persona he adopted to avoid standing out during subjugation missions. Despite his reluctance, he found his thoughts drifting to Cecilia, the Rainbow Maiden, whose astonishing healing arts and beauty had once led the church to fervently desire her for the clergy. Lucas recalled the intense possessiveness he felt toward her, a desire to keep her hidden away like a caged bird, safe from the world and solely his own. This drive to protect her gentle smile had fueled his dedication as the vice-captain of the Second Royal Guard, yet he acknowledged that her kindness was exactly why he could never truly shut her away from the world she wished to help. Back in the chaotic present, Carl, a fellow knight with fiery red hair, interrupted Lucas's reverie by teasing him about the grin plastered on his face. Carl jokingly scolded Lucas for looking dopey while facing an S-class magical beast that could easily kill him. The banter shifted to Lucas's recent communication with his fiancée, as Carl incredulously pointed out that Cecilia had not even arrived to see Lucas off, fueling rumors that their relationship was strained. Lucas defended her, but Carl pressed on, noting that high society believed Cecilia despised the engagement, especially given the dark rumors circulating about her past as Prince Felix's plaything. Whispers abounded that the newly appointed second prince should abandon Cecilia for a more suitable partner, unaware that those spreading such malice had already been quietly removed from the public stage. Carl continued his relentless teasing, laughing at the idea that Lucas's return the previous day for a single night could hardly be sufficient for a couple in love. Lucas, irritated by the insinuation that one night wasn't enough, snapped back at Carl while physically grappling with him, though Carl merely laughed and apologized while barely holding back his amusement. The levity vanished abruptly when a report arrived that 2 of the 3-layered defensive barriers had been destroyed by the beast. Lucas, shifting his demeanor instantly, signaled his readiness to engage, though he grumbled about the necessity of using X-Axe against a beast that had not yet fully completed its transformation into an ancient dragon. As he prepared for battle, Lucas tallied the number of standard swords he had broken that month, lamenting the fragility of regular steel and the cost he incurred replacing them. His subordinate reminded him that the breakage was due to his own negligence, noting that Lucas had already destroyed 3 blades recently. The urgency peaked as the knights yelled for Prince Leon to evacuate the collapsing canopy, urging Lucas to stop arguing and manifest the sacred sword immediately. Lucas sighed, dreading the lingering numbness that plagued his body whenever he wielded the immense power of XX. Before stepping onto the battlefield, Lucas turned to his aide, Finn, and inquired if Cecilia had left a message. Finn confirmed that she had, revealing that Cecilia had apologized for missing his departure and had implored him to return safely, explicitly stating, "I'm waiting." The memory of her voice over the communication device, asking him to come back to her without injury, washed over Lucas. She had warned him against visiting brothels or other women, a possessive streak that proved she harbored genuine feelings for him. Fortified by the knowledge that she was waiting, Lucas declared he would definitely return to her. With his resolve hardened, Lucas called forth the power, summoning XX. The release of energy was overwhelming, filling him with a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced before. The massive blade materialized, a weapon of impossible scale, and with a single, devastating overhead swing, Lucas cleaved the transforming ancient dragon in 2. The sheer force of the blow shattered the beast's defenses instantly, leaving the surrounding knights and Prince Leon stunned in disbelief that the creature was defeated with a single strike. In the aftermath, Lucas stood amidst the settling dust, his heart swelling with the confirmation of Cecilia's affection. However, the moment was interrupted by Carl, whom Lucas nearly threw in his agitation, prompting Carl to complain about being handled so roughly. Finn approached calmly, offering to take Lucas's cloak and informing him that tea had been prepared in the tent, thanking his master for his hard work. Inside the tent, Prince Leon formally thanked Lucas on behalf of the Kingdom of Beller for his assistance in the subjugation, while Alphonse looked on. Despite the victory, Lucas requested permission to return home immediately, only to be denied by Leon. The prince explained that due to the appearance of a fire dragon, orders from the royal castle mandated they remain on standby until morning to report. Leon argued that a hero returning alone in such a situation would spark unwanted rumors, forcing Lucas to resign himself to a night of drinking with his comrades. The knights, eager for gossip, pressed Lucas to share details about his beloved fiancée, ignoring his protests. As the night wore on, the conversation turned to the legendary sword XX. It was described as a national treasure and the embodiment of the Forest Guardian royal lineage, a weapon so heavy that typical knights could not even lift it, let alone wield it. Rumors suggested that the former hero, Andreas, could no longer use it due to age, and that the sword itself chose its master. The wielder of XX held authority rivaling, and in some cases exceeding, that of the king, bearing the weight of protecting 9 nations. Lucas revealed that the physical toll was immense, even with body enhancement magic. the numbness persisted. He recounted how he had trained tirelessly to wield it one-handed by the age of 18, a feat that required extraordinary martial skill. The discussion shifted to the political implications of Lucas's power. Carl noted that while the official announcement hadn't been made, Xax had clearly chosen Lucas as the next hero, a title Lucas insisted he had not yet inherited. Prince Leon remarked that the display of power was calculated to silence the foolish nobles who belittled the marshal, proving that a hero existed who could slay a dragon in a single blow. Finally, the topic circled back to Cecilia. Carl accused Lucas of failing to tell her that he was the wielder of Xax, suggesting Lucas was too embarrassed to reveal his title. Lucas admitted he planned to tell her only after their engagement was finalized, believing his declaration of love was sufficient. Carl then brought up the vow crest, horrified by the implication that Lucas had taken on the male side risk, which rumors claimed resulted in impotence. The tent fell silent as the knights processed this, believing Lucas had sacrificed his virility for the vow. However, a smirk crept across Lucas's face. He clarified that the risk only applied if the vow was one-sided. Since Cecilia had accepted him under mutual consent, he was not impotent at all. The realization dawned on the group that Lucas had already consummated the relationship, pulling off the technique with impressive decisiveness. The men erupted in congratulations, with Alphonse noting Lucas's terrifying decisiveness, bringing the night of camaraderie to a raucous close. In the opulent quiet of the Duke's residence, Lady Annika basked in a moment of tranquility, her skin radiant and hair silky smooth as she enjoyed the hospitality of the estate. She arrogantly mused that the reason the interior felt so comfortable, adjusted daily to her specific liking, was likely due to her own frequent visits rather than any inherent charm of the mansion itself. While the servants cast glances of pity toward her, Annika felt no desire to leave Lucas's domain, finding the environment entirely too agreeable. Her gaze drifted to Lady Cecilia, noting that the woman looked fragile and unable to move properly, a condition Annika attributed to Lucas holding her throughout the previous night. Annika broke the silence by probing into Lucas's current whereabouts, inquiring if he had finished the subjugation of the flame-devourer beast. She questioned the logic of the Royal Guard's deployment, asking why the Crown Prince would specifically summon Lucas, the second prince, for a mission of such extreme difficulty. She suggested that perhaps Lucas was getting carried away with his own strength. Cecilia attempted to deflect the line of questioning, claiming she wasn't worried, but her trembling hands and the rattling teacup betrayed her anxiety. A sudden realization struck Cecilia. Amidst the chaos of their reunion, Lucas had never actually told her the official political reason for their engagement. Sensing blood, Annika pressed her advantage. She revealed that she had been spying on the couple the previous day, having rushed into the break room fearing Cecilia was being murdered by a murderous aura leaking from the large bath, only to overhear Lucas's confession of love. Cecilia, flushed and embarrassed, demanded to know if Annika had heard anything else, but Annika simply marveled at the sweetness of the moment. Shifting the topic to more serious matters, Annika asked if Cecilia harbored any objections to becoming the fiancée of a man rumored to be a brute. Cecilia's expression softened into one of melancholic gratitude. She recounted how Lucas had saved her when Prince Felix broke their engagement and she faced the prospect of being sold to a brothel. He had not only protected her but firmly secured her position as his fiancée, allowing her to pursue her own desires. Knowing she was loved so deeply, she felt she had no right to object, even if she feared becoming a burden or the cause of his unit's ruin. Annika dismissed these fears instantly, asserting that Lucas would simply make any rumor-spreading nobles disappear. She warned that if Cecilia were to be hurt, it would enrage the hero, potentially leading to the fall of the entire kingdom. Internally, Annika pieced together the terrifying reality of Lucas's power. She realized that he was a hidden character, with a cheat setting so overpowered it defied logic. She deduced that his involvement in subjugation missions for the past few years meant he had practically already inherited the legendary sacred sword, Xax. She concluded that Lucas was not just the second prince, but the wielder of Xax and the next great hero. The implications horrified her. She wondered if the nation was doomed having a brute who prioritized his own desires in such a position of power. Before departing, she left Cecilia with a grave warning to take care of herself, as her safety was now tied to the fate of the country. Exhausted by Annika's relentless barrage of questions, Cecilia slumped in her chair, barely hanging on. However, her respite was shattered by a commotion outside. A servant named Elsa unleashed a wave of killing intent so potent it terrified even the intruder, prompting a demand for control. The maids, Anna and Kate, immediately deployed a defensive formation, casting a protective spell around Cecilia and warning her not to move. Prince Felix, the source of the disturbance, roared for Cecilia to come out. He imperiously announced that he was annulling her engagement to Lucas and ordered her to leave with him immediately. He declared that he had prepared a place for her to listen to him, treating her like a possession to be collected. When the servants refused to yield, Felix bellowed that defying royalty was treason. Cecilia, fighting through her fear, stepped forward to confront him. She chastised Felix for his rudeness in entering Prince Lucas's private quarters without permission. Felix, dismissive and arrogant, demanded she spare him the formalities and open the door, threatening to punish her for treason if she did not beg for his forgiveness on her knees. From the safety of the barrier, Elsa analyzed the situation, noting that the defensive formation, reinforced by Lucas's cheat-level magic power, would not break easily. Felix, frustrated, scoffed at the barrier and referred to Lucas as a fool who would eventually return to their side. Cecilia and her maids attempted to reason with him, explaining that an imperial decree had officially installed Lucas as the second prince and that defying this order was treason against the emperor. Felix exploded in rage, accusing Cecilia of being a vixen who tricked the king and schemed to marry Lucas solely for status. He unleashed his magic against the barrier, shaking the formation with sheer brute force. Inside, Cecilia trembled, assaulted by traumatic memories of Felix's past abuse, his cold eyes, his declaration that he didn't want to see her face, and his cruel prediction that Lucas would eventually discard her just as he had. He continued to hurl insults, accusing her of using healing magic only to win favor with commoners and knights while actually being a self-serving woman who protected only herself. Felix then made a vile proposition. He offered to take Cecilia back as his beloved concubine, claiming he could not make a damaged woman his official wife but would shower her with affection if she convinced Marquis Klein to act as his guardian. He believed that with the Marquis's support, he could regain his position and calm his father's anger. He spat venom at Lucas, calling him a savage who hunted beasts and claiming that having a royal guard member as second prince tarnished the kingdom's history. This insult to Lucas snapped Cecilia out of her fear. She fiercely defended her fiancé, shouting that Lucas attained his position as vice-captain and wielder of Exacts through tireless effort, not nepotism. She declared with absolute finality that she would never become the mistress of a man like Felix who had never made any effort in his life. Enraged by her defiance, Felix stepped forward, his face twisted into a mask of fury as he growled at her, calling her a bastard. The tension peaked as the barrier stood between the enraged prince and the defiant noblewoman, the threat of violence hanging heavy in the air. The heavy silence of the ducal estate's hallway was broken by the confident strides of a new arrival, who noted with displeasure the distinct lack of servants present to greet him. Dirk Heburst, the heir of the ducal house and older brother to Lucas, intercepted Prince Felix as he exited the room, questioning what business the ousted royal had at his family's estate. Felix, though visibly agitated, attempted to maintain his composure, greeting his big brother with forced civility. Dirk immediately dismantled this facade, scolding Felix for visiting without prior notice and questioning if the dangerous conversation he had just overheard could undeniably be called a civil discussion. Dirk pressed his advantage, sarcastically asking if Felix had intended to unleash his magic in a fit of rage and destroy the house's protective barrier, a reckless act he warned would not be tolerated within a duke's household. Felix, clinging to his crumbling status, lashed out, calling Dirk a lowly semi-royal, and commanding him to silence his mouth. Unfazed, Dirk covered his face in a gesture of mock exasperation before delivering a crushing verbal blow. He asserted that even a monkey could discern who held the superior position. While Felix possessed royal blood, he had been stripped of his rights, whereas Dirk, though only quasi-royal, currently stood second in the line of succession. He condemned Felix as a good-for-nothing without succession rights, freezing the air between them and sending Felix retreating in disgrace. With the threat of Felix removed, the atmosphere in the room shifted, though the tension remained palpable. Annika, ever the observer, offered tea to compose the shaken occupants as Dirk formally introduced himself to Cecilia. Cecilia stared at him, struck by his resemblance to Lucas. He was beautiful, yet the situation was undeniably awkward. Dirk, shedding his intimidating persona for one of playful charm, admitted he had stepped in because he found Cecilia interesting. He stepped closer, teasing her by calling her adorable and accusing her of trying to seduce him with her charm, a jest that flustered her completely. Then, with a disarming smile, he dropped a shocking proposition. He suggested she give up the demanding title of the second prince's fiancée and instead become his duchess. Cecilia recoiled, stammering that she was engaged to Lord Loki, but Dirk countered immediately, citing the existence of the oath mark she had carved. He dismissed the mark's significance, claiming it only reacted to impure intentions and would pose no issue for a political union, even suggesting they could simply adopt the child Annika would eventually give birth to. When Cecilia invoked the royal decree binding her to Lucas, Dirk waved it off with the arrogance of high nobility, boasting that the ducal house, known as the shield of the royal family, possessed enough influence to have such a decree revoked and the engagement erased as if it never existed. Dirk's gaze turned cold, his eyes devoid of the smile his lips wore, as he interrogated Cecilia's true motives. He accused her of merely seeking a medal for being the younger brother's fiancée or using Lucas solely for protection against the political enemies she feared, such as Felix and the heroine Miss Meyer. He dismantled her defenses, pointing out that her education as a consort and her ability to use healing magic were not unique. Countless white knights possessed similar magic, and foreign languages could be handled by interpreters. He argued that she was replaceable and that her attachment to Lucas was born of fear rather than love. Cornered by his logic, Cecilia felt the pain in her chest tighten as she confronted her own heart. She admitted to herself that she indeed wanted to be protected by Lucas, acknowledging that she clung to his heavy love because he had lifted her from hopeless darkness. However, when Dirk offered himself as a substitute, arguing that as Lucas's brother he would serve just as well, Cecilia's resolve snapped. She vehemently rejected him, crying out that she wanted no one but Lord Loki, realizing in that moment that her feelings went far beyond a desire for safety. She was genuinely in love with the brute who had saved her. Seeing her realization, Dirk burst into laughter, his villainous act dissolving to reveal his true intent. He confessed that he had merely been stepping in to test her resolve for his adorable little brother, admitting he would have just been a villain otherwise. He expressed relief that she had finally noticed her own feelings, though Cecilia collapsed in embarrassment and guilt, realizing she had been trying to use Lucas for protection all along. The moment of emotional clarity was abruptly shattered by a servant's frantic report. Lucas was approaching the estate at an incredible speed, his magical signature broadcasting pure, unadulterated fury. Dirk looked toward the source of the commotion, noting that the intensity of Lucas's rage threatened to wipe out the entire ducal house, signaling the imminent arrival of the jealous and enraged hero. The double doors of the drawing room shattered inward, blown off their hinges by a force that heralded the arrival of a demon god. A suffocating, pitch-black aura flooded the chamber, thick with murderous intent, as Lucas stood amidst the debris, his silhouette radiating a terrifying pressure. Dirk Heberst, previously confident, recoiled in sheer terror, while Annika shrieked, immediately pointing an accusatory finger at her brother to shift the blame for the tears staining Cecilia's face. Lucas, his eyes shadowed and voice terrifyingly calm, demanded the meaning of the scene, his composure far more frightening than any shout. Cecilia, realizing the misunderstanding, trembled not from fear of him, but from the realization that Lucas was on the brink of slaughtering his own brother. Dirk, reading the lethal atmosphere, began to panic, mentally reciting his last prayers as he realized his brother was genuinely preparing to kill him. Elsa, conversely, watched with a flushed face, seemingly excited by the display of overwhelming power, while the maids and Annika froze in place. Desperate to prevent fratricide, Dirk silently pleaded for Cecilia to intervene. Steeling her resolve, Cecilia stepped into the crushing pressure of the bloodlust and called out to him. She welcomed him home with a gentle smile, wrapping her arms around his rigid body. The effect was instantaneous. The suffocating murderous aura evaporated, replaced by a serene calm that baffled the onlookers. Cecilia, though internally noting that her clingy behavior was unseemly, celebrated the success of her strategy as the demon god reverted to a doting lover. She looked up at him, asking him to bend down, and whispered that she had missed him. Lucas, now surrounded by a visible atmosphere of flowers and sparkles, returned the sentiment, his expression softening into one of absolute adoration. Annika, observing from the side, commented on the terrifying potency of the love filter that made Lucas appear abnormally handsome, noting that their interaction felt more like that of a newlywed couple than mere fiancés. Lucas noticed the dress Cecilia wore, his eyes sweeping over the details with appreciation. He complimented the garment, describing the gold floral embroidery blooming nobly against the lapis-colored fabric and the lovely rose ribbon, revealing that he had selected every item while imagining her wearing them. He whispered that the sight of her skin through the lace was irresistible, calling her incredibly beautiful. Cecilia flushed at the praise, her heart swelling. Lucas then asked if she had been hurt, his concern evident. Cecilia reassured him, explaining that Dirk had driven Felix away and that she was unharmed thanks to everyone's protection. Relief washed over Lucas, and he pulled her into a tight embrace, thankful for her safety. Cecilia, buried in his chest, reflected on the stark contrast between Lucas and Felix. She recalled how Felix had only ever spoken ill of her, never helping her in times of trouble or complimenting her appearance, forcing her to smile through her pain. With Lucas, she realized she no longer needed to lie to herself. She resolved to respond to his feelings immediately. Meanwhile, Lucas turned his gaze toward Dirk, the deadly pressure returning for a split second. He declared that he would let the matter slide this time solely because Dirk had protected Cecilia, but warned with chilling finality that there would not be a next time. Dirk, humbled and terrified, bowed deeply, apologizing to his younger brother as Annika dragged him from the room to give the couple privacy. Alone at last, the atmosphere shifted abruptly. Cecilia, confused by the sudden silence, looked around only to be startled as Lucas closed the distance between them in an instant. He loomed over her, his expression darkening with a different kind of intensity. He explained that wielding the sacred sword X-Axe placed his body in a state of heightened arousal, a side effect he could not suppress. He confessed that with her before him, his self-control had shattered. He warned her to be prepared, declaring that even if she cried or screamed, he would not be able to stop. He captured her lips, his kiss deepening as he pressed her down. Cecilia's protests were muffled, her body betraying her resistance as he touched her. He noted the wetness dampening her thighs, teasing her denial by pointing out the physical evidence of her arousal. He slid his fingers intimately against her, calling it her reward. The sensation overwhelmed her, sending shudders through her frame as she arched her back, her mind going blank under his relentless ministrations. She reached her climax, her body trembling in his arms. As she caught her breath, her eyes widened in shock at the sight of his member, terrified by its sheer size and the impossibility of it fitting inside her. She retreated in fear, warning that she would break, but Lucas merely smiled, a predatory glint in his eyes. He reminded her that he had already warned her he wouldn't stop, pulling her back for the next round as the night truly began. The night Lucas grapples with the sheer intensity of his affection for the woman beneath him, a storm of emotions that swings violently between adoration and destruction. His internal monologue fractures into opposing impulses. One side of him yearns to spoil her, to treasure her existence, and to treat her with the utmost gentleness, pouring whisper after whisper of love into her ears. He wishes for her to depend on him completely, to smile only for him, and to view him as the sole pillar of reliability in her life. Yet, a darker, more voracious hunger consumes him simultaneously, a savage urge to break her, to act cruelly, and to gouge out the very eyes that might dare to reflect anyone other than himself. This possessive shadow demands he chain her up, hiding her away so that no other soul could ever gaze upon her again, and drives him to devour her flesh until she is brought to tears. He vows with terrifying finality that he will never let her go, declaring a life sentence of togetherness where he will never hand her over to another living soul. He asserts that escape is impossible because his love is absolute. Cecilia, the recipient of this overwhelming devotion, feels herself melting into a chaotic mess as his tongue ceaselessly claims her, biting down with a love that feels dangerously heavy. She realizes that this is not merely an embrace, but a restraint disguised as affection, a force so potent it suppresses any hope of resistance. Consciousness slips away from her, and she realizes she has fainted once again, only to be brought back by the sensation of healing magic washing over her exhausted body. Lying amidst the disarray of flowers and sheets, Cecilia questions the duality of the man hovering over her, wondering if his intent is to spoil her or to torment her with his relentless vigor. She observes the worry etched onto his face, noting the contradiction between his gentle expressions and his brute actions. She forces herself to analyze his behavior, concluding that he is attacking her with words and making her cry, yet he ultimately chooses to devour her with a desperate, overwhelming love. Within this maelstrom of sensation, she identifies things she finds adorable about him, alongside actions she desperately wants to reject, yet she accepts that all of this intensity is simply his unique method of demonstrating affection. Cecilia resolves that she does not want this bond to break, acknowledging that until recently, they were complete strangers who knew nothing of each other's preferences. As fiancés destined for marriage, she harbors a deep desire to understand him better, believing that communication is the key to bridging the gap between them. Her thoughts drift to the political landscape, recalling that Lucas, or Lord Felix, appears to dislike the nobles and young ladies of the neighboring Ura kingdom, where the king holds a grudge against him as a next-generation hero and second prince. She muses that depending on her behavior, she could transcend the title of a simple villainess and become a legendary wicked woman, wary of figures like Lord Dirk who might attempt to abduct her. However, her focus snaps back to the immediate physical reality as she realizes that if he reacts this intensely merely because she cried, the consequences for anyone actually hurting her would be catastrophic. Her body feels paralyzed, heavy, and immobile, and she worries that if these encounters continue with such ferocity, she will be physically unable to fulfill her royal duties as a prince's bride candidate. The prospect of attending social events while covered in marks terrifies her, as she fears ending up entirely painted in the evidence of his passion. Lucas calls her name softly, pulling her from her reverie, but she internally laments this overly intense style of loving, wishing it would calm down even slightly. She wonders if knights typically retreat to a bridal mansion for the sake of their wives or fiancés to indulge in such seclusion. At this moment, Cecilia gains a crystalline understanding of the true nature of his possessiveness. He simply cannot endure the thought of Lucas touching any woman other than herself. Their physical connection deepens, breath mingling with sharp gasps as he kisses her again. Despite her earlier resolve to stop him, she finds herself swallowing the saliva he passes to her, her instincts betraying her resistance. She acknowledges that kissing Lucas feels exceptionally good, and even though her mind screams to pull away, she obediently accepts his tongue, instinctively sucking back when he draws on hers. The cycle of resistance and surrender continues, her body reacting with pleasure even as she tells herself she must retreat. Suddenly, a shock runs through her as his hand moves unexpectedly, his finger invading a place that startles her completely. Panic flares as she recognizes this action from trivial knowledge she possesses, a method supposedly used by eccentric people or men confirming love for one another, but she never imagined it would be performed on her own body. She cries out his name, Lucky, in a mix of surprise and overstimulation, her body trembling under the new sensation. The pleasure mounts rapidly, bringing her to the edge of a climax induced by the intrusion, a reaction that humiliates and overwhelms her. In the throes of this intense physical peak, her body spasms uncontrollably. In the chaos of the moment, disaster strikes, Cecilia's jaw clamps down, and she realizes with horror that she has bitten Lucas's tongue. The action freezes the room. She stares in shock, her mind racing with the realization that she has hurt him. The silence that follows is deafening. She panics, wondering what to do, certain that the bite must have caused him significant pain. Lucas remains silent, his expression unreadable, which only fuels Cecilia's terror. She stammers out an apology, asking why he won't speak and if he is angry, admitting that she was genuinely scared. Desperate to explain herself, she tries to articulate that it wasn't rejection but fear of his finger that caused her reaction, while simultaneously admitting that it also felt good. She fumbles for words, terrified that this incident will mark the end of their relationship. Her internal insecurities explode. A voice in her head whispers that he might start to hate her, that Lucas doesn't need her by his side, and that over a blunder like this, she will be discarded. Tears stream down her face as she clings to him, begging him not to hate her or abandon her, driven by the singular truth that she loves him and cannot bear to be apart. Finally, the dam breaks, and she confesses aloud, "I love you," her voice trembling with the weight of her fear and adoration. She clarifies frantically that she didn't dislike his touch, but was merely startled, reiterating that the finger scared her but that she loves Lord Lucky deeply. She pleads with him to believe her, promising to try her best and begging him not to stop loving her, suggesting that if she can just get a little more used to it, she will be fine. Internally, Cecilia is mortified. She realizes she has let the confession slip out at the absolute worst possible moment, right after biting him and while in a compromised position. She berates herself for ruining what should have been a romantic milestone, lamenting that there were countless better times to confess, yet she failed to faint at this critical juncture. She looks up at him, calling him Lucky-sama, and asks if he was happy or if he hated it, her anxiety making her question everything. But Lucas pulls her into a crushing embrace, holding her so tightly she can barely breathe. She worries she shouldn't have spoken, but firmly decides that she doesn't want to regret hiding her true, honest feelings. When she finally looks at his face, she is stunned to see tears streaming from his eyes. It wasn't anger keeping him silent, it was overwhelming emotion. Without a voice, Without sobbing aloud, his tears fall quietly, confirming that their feelings have finally reached each other. They fall asleep in that embrace, the air heavy with the scent of confirmed love and mutual obsession. The narrative shifts to the following morning. The atmosphere is soft, bathed in the light of a new day. Lucas whispers, "I love you," but then immediately becomes flustered, his ears turning a bright red. Cecilia teases him gently, asking why he is getting embarrassed now after the intensity of the previous night. He greets her with a good morning, to which she responds in kind, testing the waters of their new dynamic. Lucas touches his face, asking if it was a dream, seeking validation that the confession was real. Cecilia observes him closely, noting that his eyes are the same as they were the night before, filled to the brim with a complex cocktail of emotions: love, obsession, anxiety, fear, admiration, expectation, and hope. He pleads with her to believe him, desperate for her to understand that his love is real and not a fleeting dream. Cecilia reassures him, urging him not to feel insecure, and he leans in to kiss her, reaffirming his devotion with the words, "I love you." Cecilia reciprocates without hesitation, telling him, "I love you too," and "Me too, Lord Lookie." She begins to list the specific nuances of him that she adores: the calm look in his eyes when he stares ahead, the focus when he wields a sword, and the gentleness of his large hand touching her as if she were something fragile. She cherishes his sweet, low voice whispering love, the way his gaze softens the moment their eyes meet, and even his overwhelming possessiveness that crashes over her like a crushing wave. She declares that she loves everything about him. As the chapter concludes, Cecilia reflects that the simple words she has offered are still not enough to repay the many feelings he has given her. She vows that from now on, little by little, she will return those feelings to him, solidifying their bond as they move forward together. The brutal knight and the villainess have found their equilibrium, bound by a love that is as tender as it is obsessive. At last, the barrier between their hearts dissolves, connecting their feelings in a torrent of mutual affection. Lucas, seemingly in disbelief that his affections are returned, repeatedly seeks confirmation, holding Cecilia close and kissing her with an intensity that speaks of his overwhelmed state. He asks if this truly means they are in love with each other, to which Cecilia, though feeling as if she is drifting in a dream, confirms that it is indeed reality. A flush of embarrassment heats her cheeks as she recalls that her confession tumbled out while she was completely naked and weeping, a vulnerable memory that now anchors their new reality. Despite the euphoria, practicalities intrude. Cecilia reminds him that he has work to attend to, attempting to act the responsible fiancé. However, Lucas, drunk on happiness and declaring her so cute, refuses to pull away. He insists on continuing their intimacy, revealing he has already negotiated a delay in his work schedule and even the servants are aware, effectively clearing the path for them to remain in bed. He promises to be gentle, though his question of whether she is rejecting him is rhetorical, knowing her resistance is melting. Cecilia attempts to worry about the spreading gossip, but her concerns are swept away as he prepares to devour her, jokingly ordering a light snack and water for later because he intends to keep her occupied. Succumbing to his touch, Cecilia surrenders, noting that his desire is palpable even through the sheets. The atmosphere in the room shifts entirely to one of indecent lovemaking, stretching from morning into the afternoon. He holds her relentlessly, over and over, until consciousness fades. When Cecilia finally rouses from this marathon of affection, she is shocked to discover that 2 full days have evaporated. She wakes alone, coughing and disoriented, only to learn from a maid that Lucas has not returned since that morning. The narrative pivots to a report regarding the delay Lucas experienced earlier, revealing a confrontation with Lady Mika in front of the castle. In this flashback, Mika stands defiant before a seething Lucas and his retainers, having been intercepted after leaving Lord Dirk. Finn, Lucas's aide, demands to know if she understands the weight of her words, threatening to throw her in a cell. Mika justifies her actions with twisted logic, claiming she pressured Lucas into marriage to save Felix, who lost his succession rights because he broke his engagement with Cecilia for her. She asserts that she cannot bear to see Felix hurt by the loss of his title, so she decided to switch to Lucas, who she deems worthy of being a prince, in a misguided attempt to restore the status quo. Her insolence stuns the knights. She suggests that if she becomes Lucas's woman, he should be satisfied enough to return the title of second prince to Felix. This insult to their lord sends Finn into a murderous rage, his hand reaching for his weapon as he declares his intent to kill her somewhere unseen. Lucas remains frighteningly calm, apologizing to his subordinate but letting his disdain radiate. Even Maximilian Wagner, observing the scene, notes that Lucas's eyes are dead, signaling he cares nothing for the woman before him. Mika, oblivious and delusional, interprets his behavior as shyness, thinking he looks like a maiden. Finn dismantles her fantasy, pointing out that Lucas's meticulous grooming was never for her. He brutally analyzes her situation, noting that even if she claims to be helping Felix, her actions of being embraced by other men constitute unchastity and disrespect toward royalty. When questioned about the marks on her neck, Mika denies they are from Maximilian, leaving the source of her corruption ambiguous. Mika then attempts to play the childhood friend card, believing this grants her special favor with Lucas. Finn corrects her sharply. Lucas studied how to treat women solely to appeal to one specific person, Cecilia, and Mika was merely a background character in his life. Finally, Lucas speaks, shattering her world. He looks at her with cold eyes and declares her disgusting. He clarifies that her belief in his affection was a complete misunderstanding of the social mask he wears for noble society. He delivers the final blow. He has never had feelings for her, never liked her, and never will. Mika collapses in shock, unable to process that the heroine is not the center of the world, screaming that it must be a lie. Back in the present, Cecilia processes this report, realizing her own previous assumption, that Lucas slept with Mika for revenge, was a careless remark she made during their intimacy, which only spurred him to ravage her further. She learns that Mika managed to escape custody in a single night, causing a commotion, with rumors swirling about a castration spell cast upon her without her knowledge. Cecilia deduces that Mika, seeing herself as the heroine, tried to eliminate Cecilia as a rival to secure Felix, a realization that ignites a villainous spark within Cecilia. She vows to crush Mika utterly next time, fueled by the knowledge that Lucas truly cherishes her alone. 5 days pass without Lucas returning, as he is detained at the royal castle under strict guard due to his new position and an overwhelming workload. Cecilia's loneliness festers. She aches for his deep voice, his golden eyes, and his physical embrace to overwrite the fading bruises on her body. Her maids, Annika and Elsa, catch her muttering blame toward Lord Leon for keeping Lucas away and immediately tease her for her obvious longing. Preparing for the upcoming ball, Cecilia selects a dress with a yellow-beige bodice and a deep lapis blue skirt, colors chosen specifically to remind her of Lucas. The maids note that her expression radiates a dangerous amount of sex appeal born from her loneliness, warning her that she looks like she might cause a mass murder scene by captivating every man in the room. They tease that if Lucas sees her like this, his rationality will fly out the window. To comfort her, they produce a treasure, Lucas's shirt, for her to sleep in, while slyly revealing that her own nightwear is currently with him at the castle. The chapter ends with Cecilia flustered, realizing she definitely won't be able to sleep now, knowing he is holding her intimate clothing while she wears his. The grand chandelier of the royal ballroom casts a prism of light over the gathering. Yet for Cecilia, the brilliance serves only to illuminate the emptiness beside her. She stands amidst the swirling gala, her presence commanding yet solitary, until the Crown Prince Leon steps into her orbit. He greets her with a practiced elegance, his voice slicing through the ambient chatter to compare her beauty to a mystical Nereus flower bathed in moonlight. Cecilia executes a flawless curtsy, acknowledging the high praise with the requisite humility of a subject, yet her internal rhythm remains disrupted by the absence of another. She navigates the conversation with the precision of a courtier, explaining her attendance as a duty to the royal family and a reaffirmation of her status as the second prince's fiancé candidate. Leon, observing her with a sharp, analytical gaze, notes that her radiant appearance seems cultivated for one specific absentee. He probes the cracks in her composure, asking if the night's solitude weighs upon her. Cecilia admits to the void, her confession tumbling out that she has not yet laid eyes on Lucas that day. She clings to the hope that he has returned from his urgent summons to the night order, her eyes scanning the room for the familiar, imposing silhouette that anchors her world. Suddenly, the air between them warps. As Leon steps closer, perhaps to offer comfort or merely to bridge the physical distance, a violent force erupts from Cecilia's person. A defensive crest, etched invisibly into her existence, flares into life, interpreting the prince's proximity as a threat from a male with ulterior motives. The magic acts with autonomous brutality, repelling the crown prince with a physical shockwave that sends him stumbling back. Cecilia recoils, horror washing over her as she realizes her body has just assaulted royalty. She stammers an apology, terrified that this automatic defense mechanism, a forbidden crest, tuned to reject anyone but her beloved, might be construed as high treason. Leon, recovering his balance with a laugh that barely masks the absurdity of the situation, waves off the offense. He recognizes the magic for what it is, a testament to the possessive, paranoid love that binds Cecilia and Lucas. He jests about the rudeness of the technique but swiftly pivots, offering his arm to escort her, thereby validating her status and protecting her from further diplomatic mishaps. Cecilia accepts, her relief palpable, and praises his bravery, noting internally that had it been Felix, the situation would have dissolved into chaos. As they traverse the ballroom, the whispers of the court wash over them. Noblewomen gossip behind fans, lamenting Lucas's absence while simultaneously swooning over his otherworldly beauty and dignity, a reputation that has somehow morphed from brutal to unattainable. Leon attempts to fill the silence, proposing a dance to distract Cecilia from her vigil. However, the moment the suggestion hangs in the air, he retracts it. He witnesses the devastation that fractures her expression, a look of such profound sorrow and longing that it halts him cold. He realizes that for Cecilia, the first dance is not merely a social nicety but a sacred rite reserved solely for Lucas. To rob her of that would be a cruelty he cannot commit. He apologizes, acknowledging that her face betrays a depth of emotion she herself seems unaware of. He observes a new quality in her, a lewdness or raw appeal born of her intense yearning, a transformation that marks her transition from a simple noblewoman to a woman deeply, irrevocably in love. He muses on the danger of this new aura, realizing that her visible vulnerability is acting as a beacon, drawing eyes she does not want. Right on cue, allies arrive to fortify her position. Lady Annika and Alphonse Montana materialize, cutting through the crowd. Alphonse, ever the sharp-tongued observer, teases Leon about the overly friendly atmosphere, while Annika moves to shield Cecilia from prying eyes. The dynamic shifts to a council of war as they identify a looming threat, Rolf Kremitz. Alphonse points him out, a man with a notorious habit of coveting what belongs to others, a classic case of the grass is greener syndrome. Rolf holds a twisted grudge against Lucas, fueled by an inferiority complex that dates back to their training days. The group recounts how Marshall Weber once had to pause Rolf's training to instruct a 10-year-old prodigy, Lucas, an event that Rolf's ego twisted into a slight, blinding him to the reality of the skill gap between them. Cecilia listens, the puzzle pieces of Lucas's past locking into place. The realization that Lucas has been honing his lethal proficiency since childhood only deepens her admiration. She steels herself, resolving to embody the perfect fiancé. She breathes in, composing her features into a mask of elegance and grace, determined to stand as a woman worthy of the second prince. She will not falter, not here, not now. But Rolf Kremitz advances, undeterred by the invisible walls of social etiquette or the palpable hostility radiating from Cecilia's guardians. He approaches with the swagger of a man who believes his own hype, offering a greeting that drips with calculated charm. He compliments her, his eyes raking over her with an evaluative glint that Cecilia finds instantly repulsive. She sees him not as a suitor, but as a predator sizing up prey, his interest piqued solely because she is claimed property. Cecilia parries his verbal thrusts with icy politeness. When he attempts to forge a connection by claiming she once healed him, a generic pickup line banking on her charitable nature, she shuts him down with ruthless efficiency. She refuses to play along, denying the memory and exposing the hollowness of his flattery. Her internal monologue identifies his type immediately, the persistent, self-absorbed pursuer who mistakes rejection for playing hard to get. Rolf, oblivious to his own rejection, doubles down. He suggests a date, framing it as a casual outing to escape the stuffiness of official duties. The audacity of the proposal sends shockwaves through her entourage. Annika's face twitches, her smile contorting into a mask of terrifying fury, while Alphonse looks on with a mix of amusement and concern. They begin to panic, not for Cecilia's virtue, but for Rolf's life. They know that if Lucas were to walk in on this scene, this interloper trying to poach his fiancée, the ballroom would swiftly become an execution ground. Cecilia's mind, however, drifts away from the nuisance before her. The mention of loneliness by Rolf triggers a sensory flashback that eclipses the present danger. She is transported back to the previous night, enveloped in the oversized fabric of Lucas's shirt. She recalls the texture of the cloth against her skin, the lingering scent of him that clung to the fibers, and the bittersweet mixture of comfort and solitude she felt curling up in his clothes. The memory is visceral, She can almost feel the phantom warmth of his arms, the golden intensity of his eyes that are currently missing from her reality. The ache in her chest throbs, a physical manifestation of her desire to be held, to be overwritten by his presence until nothing else remains. Back in the ballroom, the tension mounts. Alphonse whispers a grim warning to the group. Lucas destroys obstacles without mercy. The mere idea of this unrequited love scenario playing out in front of the brutal knight suggests a bloodbath. They view Rolf now not as a rival, but as a walking corpse, a man unknowingly dancing on the edge of a volcano. Rolf, mistaking Cecilia's silence for contemplation, presses closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The air thickens, the collective breath of the group held in anticipation of disaster. Just as the atmosphere reaches its breaking point, a voice cuts through the tension like a blade. "Sorry I'm late, Cecilia." The words are simple, but the weight behind them shatters the scene. Lucas has arrived. The narrative hangs on the precipice of his entrance, the promise of violence and reunion intertwining as the brutal knight steps onto the stage to claim what is his. The heavy doors of the ballroom seem to shudder as Lucas finally bridges the distance, his presence instantly dominating the space. "Sorry I'm late," he murmurs, his voice a low rumble that vibrates through Cecilia's very core. She finds herself pierced by his gaze, pulled in without a shred of resistance, her body betraying her training by trembling under the sheer weight of his attention. Despite the public setting and the propriety expected of an engaged couple, the air between them thickens with an intimacy that borders on scandalous. Cecilia notes with a jolt of visceral panic that his pupils are dilated, swallowing the gold of his irises, a predatory sign she has learned to associate with his most dangerous moods. She musters every ounce of her strength just to maintain her ladylike smile, her internal monologue a frantic scream that all her harsh lessons were for this singular moment of survival. Lucas, resplendent in his formal military attire which fits him with devastating perfection, wastes no time in dismantling her defenses. He takes her hand, not with the polite detachment of a nobleman, but with a reverence that burns. He brings her fingers to his lips, the sound of the kiss, a distinct smooch, echoing with mortifying clarity in the hush of the hall. He whispers that she looks stunning, so ethereal that he almost mistook her for the goddess Wai descending from the heavens. Cecilia fights the urge to collapse, her knees shaking violently beneath her dress, repeating a mantra to herself that she must not lose, that she must uphold the pride of the second prince's fiancé. Yet, the heat rising in her cheeks betrays her. She feels her sweat glands collapsing under the pressure of his worship. The crowd around them erupts into whispers, the onlookers scandalized and entranced in equal measure. Lucas, oblivious or perhaps emboldened by the audience, declares that she is too dangerous, that she has made him, a man who sees no one else, completely obsessed. He continues his assault on her composure, kissing her hand again, deeper this time, treating her fingers like a holy relic. Cecilia's mind races, noting that this behavior feels terrifyingly similar to the aftermath of their engagement, a raw, unfiltered desire that has no place in a ballroom. She wonders if this is his normal, a frightening recalibration of her reality. He murmurs about leaving a mark to prove she is his face inching closer to hers, threatening a kiss on the lips right there on the dance floor. Cecilia's survival instincts kick into overdrive. She knows that a kiss here would be a catastrophic breach of decorum, a move that could ruin the fragile political balance they are trying to maintain. She practically screams internally for him to stop, her eyes wide with the plea. Reading the room if not her mind, or perhaps simply deciding to savor the moment, Lucas pulls back slightly. Seizing the reprieve, Cecilia pivots to the only socially acceptable outlet for this tension. She curtsies, a movement of practiced grace that belies her internal chaos, and formally invites him to dance. It is a desperate gambit to channel his energy into something structured. Lucas accepts, his voice dropping to a confessional whisper that only she can hear. He tells her he loves her, that he has been waiting for this moment, holding back for so long just to hold her like this. He leads her onto the floor, and as the music swells, the world narrows down to just the two of them. They move in perfect harmony, a swirl of yellow beige and deep lapis blue against his stark uniform. He calls her his fiancée, his future wife, painting a picture of a future where they find happiness together. For a few glorious minutes, the political machinations and the terrifying intensity of his love bleed into a fairy tale perfection. Meanwhile, on the periphery of this romantic storm, a more calculated scene unfolds. Crown Prince Leon stands with Lady Annika and Alphonse, observing the couple with a mix of relief and opportunism. In his hand, Leon holds a small, cube-shaped object, a recording crystal. The maids and Alphonse discuss the device, revealing that it is an ultra-lightweight, compact model made possible by the fire tree core they sealed previously. This magical innovation allows them to record the scene with the same high capacity as larger models. Leon gleefully confirms that he has recorded the entire first dance, a treasure to be preserved. But the recording has a darker purpose as well. Elsa, who has been prowling the party, has ensured that the crystal also captured the unsightly bugs, the men who dared to look at Cecilia with lust or intent. These recordings are destined for Finn, Lucas's aide, to be used as evidence or perhaps targeting data for future retribution. As the dance concludes and the couple rejoins the royal group, the reality of their situation crashes back in. Leon, pocketing the crystal, adopts a serious tone. He reminds them that the official engagement ceremony is only a month away. The Kremitz family, whose heir Rolf had earlier harassed Cecilia, is powerful and respectable. They must avoid any further incidents that could undermine the royal family's influence. He warns Lucas to rein it in, to stop looking at everyone as if he wants to murder them. Cecilia, emboldened by the dance and the need to secure her future, speaks up. She tugs on Lucas's sleeve, her expression shifting into a shy, pleading look that hits Lucas with the force of a physical blow. She asks for a favor, a date. She points out that they haven't gone out together properly since their engagement and asks if, schedule permitting, they could go on an outing. She adds that she wants to make a promise with Lady Annika as well, trying to soften the request with social cover. Lucas unravels. The sight of her pleading face destroys his composure entirely. He grabs her hand, his thumb caressing her skin, and groans that she must be joking. He confesses that if she looks at him like that, he will want to steal a kiss right this second, regardless of the audience. He even threatens, half jokingly, half desperately, to defect to another country with her just to escape the prying eyes and duties that keep them apart. The maids, Annika and Elsa, watch this meltdown with amusement, noting that Cecilia's pleading is too effective on the brutal night. Elsa, always the pragmatist, suggests they might as well just leave and take out Prince Leon for not keeping his promise of protecting their time together. The tension breaks into a plan. They decide that tomorrow, they will all eat roast goose together at the Duke's estate. It is a domestic, grounding promise that anchors them back to sanity. Lucas agrees with a look of pure pleasure, and for a moment, they are just a group of friends planning a meal, the heavy weight of titles and prophecies forgotten. However, the narrative shifts sharply in the second half of the file. The scene moves to the Duke of Heberst's estate after the ball. The maids are debriefing, gushing over Cecilia's performance. They describe her standing under the chandelier as the goddess of flowers, a dignified and elegant presence that cut down her enemies with a smile. Elsa reveals she was exhausted from hunting bugs all night, protecting Cecilia from unwanted advances. The maids bond over their shared fatigue and devotion, with Elsa dramatically declaring she might break her loyalty contract with Lucas to serve Cecilia exclusively because she is so moved by her mistress's beauty. But the roast goose dinner never happens. The joyous atmosphere curdles into melancholy as the days pass. Lucas does not return. Reports trickle in that due to an unexpectedly large number of magical beasts appearing in the border forests, Lucas has been detained. He is out there, fighting to clean up the aftermath, unable to leave until the threat is neutralized. Cecilia tries to be understanding, telling Prince Leon that no apology is necessary, that she knows they are busy. But the loneliness gnaws at her. She sits in her room, the silence deafening after the noise of the ball. The maids discuss the anomaly of the situation. Large, powerful magical beasts usually reside near the abyss, far from civilization. It is strange and deeply concerning that they are appearing in the forests near the capital. They reassure Cecilia that Lucas is invincible, that no beast in this world can defeat him, but the seed of worry is planted. They speculate on the consequences if something were to happen to Cecilia while he is away. The terrified consensus is that it would trigger Lord Lucas versus the Kingdom of Beller, a war waged by one man against his own nation in retaliation. The file concludes with a bittersweet scene. Elsa, trying to cheer Cecilia up, brings out the treasure once more, the shirt Lucas wore to the party. It is a repeat of their earlier joke, but this time it carries a heavier weight of longing. The girls huddle together, planning to contact Finn at the castle tomorrow for news. They settle into a secret girls-only story, waiting for the return of the man who holds their world together, while the shadow of the mysterious beast outbreak looms over the capital.